Welcome back. Let's take you to this now. The City of Cape Town's Disaster Risk Management Centre has reported that nearly 300 homes were destroyed in a fire at the Joe Slovo informal settlement in Langa, displacing over 600 people. Fortunately, no injuries or fatalities have been recorded. Now, this incident has raised concerns about why the city is particularly vulnerable to fires during this time of year. To help explain the weather conditions that contribute to Cape Town's susceptibility to these fires, we now have SABC's weather expert Lehlohonolo Thobela with us in studio to explore this further. Lehlohonolo, a very good morning to you. I mean, this is devastating, right? Every year we are sitting with, these fires destroying homes. Luckily, this time around, nobody was injured or even there were no fatalities. But 600 people have been displaced. Just talk us through, just from a weather perspective, why is Cape Town so susceptible to fires, particularly this time of the year?
Good morning and thanks for the opportunity. I think the main thing is to start where the seasonal forecast starts. Seasonal forecast was suggesting above normal temperatures for most parts of the countries. Now with the seasonal forecast, we're suggesting southwestern parts to have more and more of above normal temperatures, which then contributes to dry conditions over the southwestern interior. We spoke about Cape Town, which is in the Western Cape. They haven't been getting a lot of rain. The humidity is quite less there. But one thing that's contributing in terms of fires is the strong winds that you get along the areas. We've been having a lot of cold fronts that slip south of the country, but with cold fronts moving over into the southwestern interior, they bring about strong winds. So with the strong winds, the blowing of fires then starts to be excessive and it gets to be hazardous. I mean, we speak of today, we have felt fires expected, and I'd rather say weather conditions conducive over the Northern Cape, the central parts of the Northern Cape. This is due to the dry conditions that we've been having. Yes, we've been having rain, but it's mainly in the eastern parts. So what you look at when you speak about felt fires, I'd say weather conditions conducive for that. It's strong winds, humidity. Once we look at humidity, once it's less or less to close to nothing, we get to be more and more dry over the southwestern interior. Temperatures could be high. Warm temperatures result in less precipitation and the rainfall history of the area. And if you count down to what we've had in the past 2 weeks, most of the rain is in the eastern parts and it's quite dry, but the winds are strong. And you're still expecting windy conditions into further. Now, another thing that people would I'd say rather start taking caution off is to make sure that you don't start unnecessary fires, because sometimes you start it and then it's hard for you to maintain, or you just leave it there for another person to sort out, and by the time they check, we look at devastating news like what you've just mentioned.
And that's an important one, because I think a lot of the time people think that they can contain a fire, particularly when it starts in one home, but as you say, it's the strong winds that actually flare up this particular fire, which is why we're left with 600 homes gutted, in some cases even thousands. Just talk to us about, is this something that can be predicted? So for instance, we've seen, with your adverse weather like flooding and other weather conditions, where you would then give a warning and some form of levels where people can then take caution.
So we spoke about the warnings that I've just said now. With the warnings, it's usually we have a felt fire index that we issue as the South African Weather Service issues that every time in the weather conditions every day. Now I mentioned the central parts of the Northern Cape with conditions conducive for felt fires. That's what it means. Just not so, I think 2 months ago, we wrote a media release in the South African Weather Service that was speaking of fires that happen in the northeastern parts of the country. And you can attest that before we had the rainy conditions over the high veld, it was quite dry. We had a lot of heat waves, more strong winds and dry microbursts in the northeastern parts, which resulted in more and more of felt fires. I mean, we wrote a media release about the Groenpunt prison in the Free State that resulted in more of that, and they actually had crown fires. So what happens is that the less of the rainfall you have, the less humidity, then the plants gets dry. And the drier they get, the more the wind blows, it's easy for another plant to catch fire. Then as it blows over, it gets to that. But in the South African Weather Service, they have a warning system for that. We have and it has categories. It will start from moderate and sometimes gets to low likelihood. However, the one that you start obviously looking at is the very dangerous to extremely dangerous. Moves in colors. Very dangerous is orange, and then the red is extremely dangerous. But what the mistake that people do is to focus focus on the red. But even the very dangerous, it's something to look at, because you need to start to a more situation where we're proactive instead of being reactive.
And in the coming days, what's the outlook looking like, not only for Cape Town, but perhaps around the country in as far as fires are concerned? Because, I mean, you've mentioned, some of those conditions that make it even more conducive, like humidity, wind speed, etc.
With the seasonal forecast suggesting more summer rainfall for the central and the eastern parts, the central and the southwestern parts will remain dry. With the drier conditions, we're expecting areas like the Northern Cape, the Western Cape, parts of the western half of the Eastern Cape into the southern parts of the Free State, as well as some parts of the central and the western parts of the Northwest. You can still see a lot of warnings from that, and felt fires expected. As we speak today, there is a felt fire warning for the central and the eastern parts of the Northern Cape province. So it's those areas where you're expecting drier conditions to persist into the summer, where you can expect a lot of these warnings.
It's central parts, the Northern Cape,
Western Cape, Eastern Cape, central and western parts of the Northwest.
Because now it becomes weather speak. But very quickly, before I let you go, I mean, you're not a firefighter, right? But what we've seen is that a lot of these blazes are tough to distinguish. But just talking about these wind speeds, I mean, what are we talking about here in terms of how aggressive they can be?
I mean, winds can get to about 50 kilometers per hour. But now, as we've seen, they're ranging between 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. You'll have gusts that gust about 55 to about 60 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
And as it blows, then you can imagine, imagine the speed of a car. If you're driving 60 or 80 and the wind speed, that when we issue a warning and start speaking of damaging winds, those are the windy conditions that we'd expect.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lehlohonolo, for your time and, of course, unpacking all of that for us. Really do appreciate it. Well, that was the SABC's weather expert here in studio with me, Lehlohonolo Thobela.